by thanking you all for being here this morning. I'm excited to have a chance to talk with you. And I'm so excited that this convention is at Illinois State University this year. I think that's fantastic. And I want to thank our chapter for doing such a fantastic job of getting everything set up, everything running smoothly. You guys have been awesome. So thank you very much. So I will talk a little bit about myself through the course of this presentation, but I really wanted to make sure that this was something that would be interesting to a wide audience. So I know there are people here who are interested in being teachers and being band directors who are music majors now, but there's also people in lots of different career fields. So I wanted to talk about ways that I've been successful and how you can potentially apply them to yourself. I feel like I am one of the luckiest people ever because I have the best job ever. I get to do marching band as my job all the time. And to me, I feel so lucky that I get a chance to do that. So I'll talk a little bit about how I got to this position here at Illinois State, but I'll also talk about the things that I have learned along the way, some of the things that I wish I had known as I made decisions getting to this position, and some of the things that I learned from mentors and the people I talked to along the way. So as I talk, I'll frame this specific to my experience, but it is applicable to any career field. So although I'll be talking in terms of school, in terms of music, in terms of lessons, in terms of band directing, it's definitely applicable to nearly everything. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about my professional development specifically, so how I ended up getting to Illinois State University. So first, just a little bit about Illinois State University. We're here in Normal, Illinois. The school is about 22,000, and we have a 300-piece marching band. So as the director of athletic bands, I get to work with the Big Red Marching Machine, which is a highlight for me. I also get to direct concert bands and work with music education majors because there's a very large music school here at Illinois State. So in order to get to this position, I'm going to start with my undergraduate degree. So I knew I wanted to be a band director from the time I was in junior high. That's what I wanted to do. I tried out to be drum major of the homecoming parade band in 7th grade, and I didn't get it, and I still thought it was the coolest thing ever. I remember applying, I remember auditioning, I remember not getting it, and I really almost didn't care. I just thought the whole thing was great. And from that point forward, I really knew this, how can it get any better? I loved it. So I went to University of Illinois, which is just a little bit down the road, and I got a bachelor's of music education degree there. And one of the things I'll talk about a lot throughout the course of this presentation is experience. So one thing that the U of I was great for me is because I got a lot of different experiences. So while I was there, I was in the Marching Illini, and I got to be an administrative assistant for that group. I got to direct a pet band from that group, and I was also a drum major of the marching band. So I had a lot of great experiences as part of my time at the University of Illinois. Once I graduated, I moved on and went to be the associate director of bands at Plainfield Central High School in Plainfield, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago, and it was a great, again, experience for me because as the associate director of bands, I got to do almost everything related with a high school band program. So I conducted all of the concert bands. I got to conduct the marching band. We had an extracurricular competitive marching band and a curricular non-competitive band. I got to do both. I got to work with madrigals and jazz band and pit orchestra. I had a chance to do a little bit of everything. So for me, it was a great opportunity because I got some great experiences out of that position. I still knew that maybe I knew that I still wanted to be a band director. I thought I wanted to be a college marching band director, but I wasn't sure because I did love teaching high school. But I knew I wanted to get better, so I decided that I would move on and get a master's degree. So I went to Indiana University, and I had a great time there. I loved being at IU, and again, I got great experiences while I was there. And I'll actually be there next weekend for Mr. Pratt's retirement, so I'll see you there. But it was a fantastic experience for me, and I had great mentors, and I made great friends and relationships while I was there. So that was a fantastic time experience. And when I was finished at IU, I was pretty certain I wanted to be a college band director. And I thought absolutely the next thing that I had to do was I had to get a degree in wind conducting, because the people around me, that's what I saw them do. So I started looking for either jobs I could get or opportunities for me to go and get a doctorate in wind conducting. What I did instead was go back to the University of Illinois, and I got a doctorate of music education. I was initially very, very resistant to this because I loved U of I, loved my undergrad, but I thought I needed to go somewhere different so I could meet different people and I could have different experiences. And I was very hung up on the fact that it was an education doctorate and not a DMA. I was really concerned that that was going to limit me in what I could eventually end up doing. So I was fairly resistant. Just as a little background about this, I'm going to get into a little more detail on this later, but as a little background, and just to clarify, so a lot of conductors who are conducting in the college setting have a DMA, a Doctor of Musical Arts degree in conducting specifically. There are fewer who have a doctorate in music education. There are still some of us, but the majority of them have a doctorate in conducting. So that would be a DMA, and I was going to end up with an EDD, a Doctorate of Music Education. For me, I thought that was a problem, and it ended up actually being a great opportunity, but again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. When I left Illinois, I got a job at Virginia Tech, which was great, and I actually got that job at Virginia Tech as a result of my affiliations and relationships with people who were at Indiana. So again, that was very helpful for me to have those relationships with different people. But my time at Virginia Tech was fantastic. Just to give you some background about Virginia Tech, it's a school of about 35,000. It's primarily an engineering school, so that's the main focus of their study there, and it is a great football program. If you follow football, Virginia Tech typically has pretty great football happening, which means from an athletic band perspective, there were a lot of great opportunities and a lot of things that, that were happening with the marching band as a result of being affiliated with football. The marching band was pretty big. We marched 350 people, so it was a pretty large marching band. And again, it really helped that we had the football to help. People really wanted to be part of it because they wanted to be able to go to the games. So my experience at Virginia Tech was fantastic because it was such a great program. But more important than that, Virginia Tech was where I met Dave McKee. So Dave McKee is a person who is in the picture with me. He was the director of the Marching Virginians. I was the associate director, so I worked with him. He had been there for, by the time I got there, he had been there for 30 years. So he had really developed a great program, and I learned so much from him. He is definitely one of my mentors. He is someone that I talk to all the time. If I've got professional questions, even personal questions, I know that he's someone that I trust, that I can go to, that I can ask questions to. I think it was working with him at Virginia Tech was great because when I went in, I think naturally all of us do this, but I think we compare the experiences we've had with the experiences that we are going to have. So when I was going into Virginia Tech, I really thought that the pinnacle of what I had learned had been at the University of Illinois and being in the Marching Illini. To me, that was amazing, that was fantastic. I loved it, and I thought, that's just the best way to do everything. And when I got to Virginia Tech, it was very, very different. It was a completely different structure, and it really opened my eyes and made me think, okay, so maybe there are other ways of doing things. And that sounds very simplistic, but I think we naturally all go back to what we know. And we naturally all go back to a great experience that we had. So I think about a great experience that I had, and I think if I want to pass on that experience, I need to try to duplicate that for my students. And I learned, being at Virginia Tech and seeing that, kind of a completely different way of doing things, which was great for me. Because truly, whatever situation you're in, there's different ways to do great things. And so it sounds so simplistic and so obvious, but for me, it hadn't been obvious, and it was really nice to see that and realize, okay, so I can do some really great things in a different way. It was very, very eye-opening for me, and it was a great experience. And I got out of it a fantastic mentor in Dave McKee. I eventually ended up moving and went to Arkansas State University, and that was a hard decision to make because I loved being at Virginia Tech so much. But the one experience that Virginia Tech couldn't give me was the opportunity to be a director. I had been an assistant director when I taught in high school, and then again in college, and I knew I needed the experience of being a director of athletic bands. I knew that was an important part of my development as a teacher and as a musician. It's sort of interesting to note, when I applied for this job at Arkansas State University, I was somewhat conflicted as to whether or not I should take the job. And I decided to call people that I knew and ask them. So I called all great people, and all people that I would be lucky to call a mentor. I probably talked to 8 or 9 people. Here's the thing, when you ask 8 or 9 people for their opinion, you're gonna get 8 or 9 different answers. And so that's what I got. I had 8 different ideas about what I should do. So it ultimately didn't help me at all. And it wasn't that I didn't appreciate their input or that all of them weren't right in what they were saying, it just didn't help me make a decision. So that was an important lesson to learn for me, that when I have a question, a professional question or something like that, I have 2 people that I go to, and both of those people are in jobs like the job I have, like the kind of job at that time that I wanted to have. So I trusted their professional opinion, and I wanted to hear what they had to say. So now when I have a question, it's not that the other people I talk to weren't great mentors, but now when I have a question, I talk to Dave McKee from Virginia Tech, usually I usually call both, but I also talk to Dave Woodley at IU. They're my 2. They're my 2 kind of go-to mentors because they have the kind of job that I want to have, and they're doing the kind of things that I wanted to be doing. So they were my go-to people. So I learned that lesson, and it was definitely a good lesson to learn. But my time at Arkansas State was great. Arkansas State is smaller than Illinois State. It's about 14,000. We had about a 200-piece marching band, and it was a great opportunity. It's always interesting going to different places in the country because they work so differently than what you're used to. The education structure, the band structure, the way they do music, it was all very different. So it was a great experience for me to see something that was different and experience that. So I think one of the things that I can look back at all of these different things, I have great and unique experiences and opportunities at all of them. So when I was at Indiana, one of the things that I really loved was I got to march when there were some holes. I was in AI, an associate instructor, and Mr. Woodley had asked me, he actually asked all of the AIs, do any of you, we've got a hole here, do any of you want to fill that hole and march the show? And I was like, oh yeah, please let me, I wanted to so bad. And everybody else was like, oh, no. So I was very excited I got to do that. And for me, I thought it was just the coolest thing to be able to march in that band and really experience it from being in the Marching 100. I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that. While I was at Virginia Tech, there were lots of different opportunities. Again, they were all connected with football. So I got to take a band to Bristol Motor Speedway and perform there, which is wild. If you have never been to a NASCAR race in person, it is something else. It is like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was pretty cool. Going there and performing with the band was really pretty neat. And just in general, because the football was so developed there, we traveled a lot as a result of that. So I went to the Sugar Bowl, I've gone to lots of different bowl games, traveled to the Chick-fil-A Bowl, kickoff games, lots of different opportunities. Got to go down to Atlanta to get beat by Alabama pretty bad, and that was fun. So just a lot of really interesting experiences that go beyond just, I was the assistant director at this marching band. It was really so much more than that. So as I'm thinking about how I got here, one of the things I asked myself along the way was, is this the right decision? Am I doing the right thing? when I was looking at going to Arkansas State University, I was asking myself, is this the right decision? And I sort of looked at all these decisions I was making as if there was only one path to get me to where I eventually wanted to be. So that made every decision seem just crucially important and almost crushing, because it was so important to make the right decision. And one of the things that I learned, along with the help of Dave and Mr. Woodley, was that there's multiple right paths to get you to where you want to go. If you're motivated, if you want to be successful at what you're doing, you will find a way to make that work to get to where you want to be. There's not just one right path and one right answer to get you to that place. So, looking back, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I made the decisions that I made and some of the things that I thought about as I was going through that process. Specifically, I'll talk a little bit about my thought process in terms of picking a grad school and going to grad school, which is something I hope might be beneficial to people here who are thinking about that process. And then also I'll talk a little bit about marketing yourself. And I'll put it in terms of resumes and applications. Again, something I hope that's applicable to people who are in college now and thinking about applying for jobs in the future. But both of those things are really important and make a really big difference in how you are successful and how you can find the path that you want to be your right path. I'll have time at the end for questions, so if you do think of questions along the way, please hold on to them, because I will have time for you if you have questions at the end. So let's talk a little bit about graduate school and how I decided to move forward in my profession. So, first of all, how do you approach grad school selection? When I decided on Indiana, I sort of fell into it by accident. It was a very, very lucky accident, but I definitely did not think about it the way I should have thought about it. I talked to my undergraduate band director and said, where should I go to grad school? And he said, you should go to Indiana. And I said, okay. And I applied to Indiana, and that was it. I think if I had gone through these steps, I would have made the same decision. It was absolutely the right place for me. But I did learn a little bit more when I was looking at my doctorate. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have an idea of what your end career goals are. You don't have to be totally set on exactly what you want to do, but you do want to have a general idea of what you want to study. If there are two things that you're interested in, you want to make sure you're going somewhere that will allow you to keep both of those things active, so that you can set yourself up for an opportunity to do either of those things in your future. You don't have to keep that same career goal, but you do want to have a general idea so that you can make a choice that's really going to help you out. So how do you do that? I think the best way to do it is look at professionals who are active in your field. Find out where they studied, find out who they studied with, find out what they studied. So how did they get to the place where they are now? Those are the questions you want to ask. You want to identify who those people are and find out what it takes to be relevant in the field that you've chosen to be in. So next, I think you want to start by looking at the programs that those relevant people in your profession have attended. That's a good place to start. And then from there, you can move on and do some of your own research. But you want to look at graduate schools that offer the experiences you need to be successful. So notice I said the experiences you need to be successful versus the degree to be successful. So I told you I would talk a little bit more about my University of Illinois music education versus wind conducting sort of dilemma. So when I was making my choice in terms of doctoral programs, University of Illinois wasn't on my radar at all because they didn't offer a wind conducting DMA. Anybody who was interested in sort of that conducting aspect would go and get a music education degree. They would get the EDD, and then they would do the band conducting things along with that music education degree. So when I really looked more in depth at the experience that I would get there, I had a lot of opportunity for some great experiences. So when I looked at what I would be doing, I would have my own concert band. I had opportunities to guest conduct the more advanced bands. I had conducting lessons, and I had a conducting master class. And I had the opportunity to work very closely with the Marching Illini. I got to write music and drill for them, which they performed. I got to take part in college game day. I took a band to the NCAA tournament. So I had great experiences, the same experiences really that I would have at another institution as a DMA student. The benefit to me was that I would also get the opportunity to get a music education degree, and along with that came music education assistantships, which let me teach classes that normally I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to teach. So for me, looking at that program, I had the opportunity to not only have a wind conducting background, but I also had the music education background. So it made me more marketable in a wider, broader range. So for me, it was a win. It was a really good move. But I did have to think about how I was going to market myself once I finished with that degree, so that the degree wouldn't read an EDD, a music education doctorate, without all of the band conducting experience. So that was one of the challenges that I had after I finished grad school, was thinking about how I marketed myself so people would know that I had experience and was qualified to do the things that I really wanted to do. So, step 4, what schools offer programs in your area of interest? Be educated about what programs exist. A great place to start is if you're looking, again, at people, look up people's bios, look at concerts, people who have guest conducted, people who have been guest soloists, look at what those people are doing. If you're involved in a field outside of music, look around where you're at, look at the people who are relevant, who are active, find out where they've gone to school. It's a great place to start. If you have geographic limitations, then obviously you want to focus on those areas only and make sure you are looking at areas that are reasonable for you to consider within that geographic location. You want to make sure that you are not just looking at what the degree program says, but look at what the curriculum entails. So again, if I had just looked at the degree at University of Illinois and hadn't really looked at the curriculum, I would have missed out on a great opportunity. So make sure you're not focused just on the degree, but you're looking at the curriculum and seeing what kind of classes and seeing what kind of experiences you'll get as part of that program. So again, I talked about this a little bit. Online research is a great way to find these schools. For me, the College Band Directors National Association was a great way to find programs that were available. That is not just for college band directors. They've got a really reasonable student rate. And what's great is the email listserv sends advertisements for assistantships all the time. So it's a good way to find assistantships that are available. Clinics like Midwest are good places where you can network. A convention like this is a good place where you can talk to other people and ask them about the schools they go to and if they would recommend them for graduate study. And getting involved in extracurricular programs, for example, for me, conducting symposiums or things like that, that again allow you to network and meet new people. That's going to be the best way for you to find out where you think you might fit in and hear about programs that you think are really applicable to what you want to do. And that's not just with music, that's really with any kind of career field. There are going to be conventions like that and places like that where you can network, you can meet people, and you can learn about different grad programs that might be beneficial. You want to look at what the graduates of those programs have accomplished. This is really important because you want to go to a school that's going to set you up to be successful and set you up to get the kind of job that you want to get. So the first thing to look at is, do the graduates of those programs have jobs in the line of field that they want to be? You want to make sure that you're going somewhere where they have a good track record of getting their students jobs, because that's ultimately what you want. You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to move forward in your career. You don't want to go somewhere that's not going to lead you to the next step. And again, there's multiple next steps. There's multiple decisions, or there's multiple ways that are the right next step, but you want to have options, and you want to have good options once you finish with your graduate program. So I listed this at step 6. Really, it could be all throughout this process. Talk to your mentors. Just like I talked to my undergraduate band director who said, go to Indiana, and I said, okay. That was a pretty simplistic way to do that, but you want to talk to people that you trust and people that you look up to as you go through the process so that you can get their feedback. They're going to have really good advice, and they're going to know places that you should look at and know of teachers that you'll mesh really well with. So you want to make sure you include them in the process as you go. You can also talk to people who have gone through the same experience you have. If you have friends in college who are a few years ahead of you and they've done these things, they've gone through that process, talk to them. Find out what they wish they had known, how they managed to navigate this and be successful. So that's a great way for you to make sure that you're sort of staying informed and keeping an open mind as you go through the process. So after you narrow this down and you find some schools that you think are good fits for you, you want to make contact with those programs. So this is important, right? Because this is the first opportunity they have to meet with you and interact with you. So you don't want to look like an idiot. So here's how you do that. First of all, you want to make sure that if you contact someone, you don't ask a question that you could easily find out the answer to if you just looked on the website. So you don't want to send an email to somebody that you want to study with and ask a question like, how many bands do you have in your program? Because that's something you can look and you can find pretty easily. So you want, with any questions that you ask, you want to make sure that you're framing those in a way that they can tell you've done your research and you've looked at their program and you're educated about what they do. Additionally, in this email and this initial contact, you wouldn't have to ask questions. You could just ask if you could come visit, if you could observe a class, you could set up a meeting or a lesson, but you don't necessarily have to ask a question in that initial email. You could let them know you're interested and ask for more information, ask if you could come observe. That's a really good way to evaluate if you think you would be a good fit with that teacher. It's not so much about getting the best teacher. The best teacher is the person that's really going to work well with you and that's a good fit with your learning style. So where you might look and think everybody who is great goes to this school. Okay, some people who are great go to that school, but if you're not going to fit with that teacher, it's really not going to be beneficial. It's not going to help you as much as you think it might be helpful. So you want to make contact, you want to reach out, you want to have some interaction with those teachers so that you can determine if it really is going to be a good fit for you. The other thing, I guess I'll mention this really quickly. So I put on here email graduate students for more information. I think this is good. And when I was at grad programs, I always had people emailing me. I received a couple a year. People emailing me asking me if I would recommend a program, what I thought about it. I think this is a great way to get sort of an inside track on what people think about the program. Be aware if you do that, you will get very honest answers. And you also have to take all of those answers with a grain of salt. So sometimes somebody who wouldn't recommend the program is saying that not because it's not a good program, but maybe because it's just not a good match between them and that professor. And it's not indicative of not a good program or not a good teacher. So it's a great way to get information, but you have to make sure that you're not taking that as the ultimate word and eliminating schools based on the answers that you get back from those students. So developing a timetable is really important, and this is something you might want to do at the beginning of the process, but also think about towards the end of the process. One of the things that's specific to music is most college positions require 3 to 5 years of public school teaching experience. So that means most graduate school programs in music education and conducting also require 3 to 5 years of public school teaching experience because they want their students to be set up for success and set up to be able to get a job when they graduate. And if they don't have the minimum requirements that are set by most positions, it's going to be more difficult for them to get a job. So you can't be in a hurry. You have to make sure that you're willing to put in the time that you need to get from point A to point B. With most career paths, it's really difficult to rush that, no matter how much you might want to just jump in and get right to exactly what you want to do. You want to do it in the right way, so once you get to that end goal, that you can be the best musician, the best teacher, the most successful at your job that you can possibly be. Besides just minimum requirements for experience, anytime you have experience before you have education, it's helpful, right? Because it gives you real-world experience and information that you can apply the education to. It gives you a unique understanding of what's going on, and I think that's really helpful. So there's multiple benefits to having that kind of experience. Make sure you have a plan B, and make sure you're prepared to plan ahead. So some schools have really small studios, or they will have a limited number of students that they can accept. And they may say, you're accepted in 2021, and then you have to decide, okay, do I really want to wait that long before I go back to school? Does that work with my timetable? Or do I need to look at another program that's going to more match up with what I'm ready to do now? And that's what you have to decide if it's right for you. You have to decide that the quality of the program is worth waiting, or if there's another program that you feel just as strongly about that's available sooner. You just want to plan ahead, and you want to make sure that you are kind of prepared for that. A lot of programs have a smaller number of students because, again, experience is really important. And when you have larger numbers of students in a program, oftentimes that dilutes the experiences that you can have as part of that program. So in an effort to make sure that students have the best experiences possible, they keep numbers small, because experience is really more important than the degree. So having smaller numbers is really a benefit. That's something that they're doing to protect you and make sure students get the best experience, the best opportunities they have to move forward in their career. So when you're ready to fill out application materials, we'll talk about this a little bit in more detail when we get into resumes and applications, but you want to present yourself as positively as possible. So again, you want to think about experience versus position. When you're talking about what you've done, make sure you include experiences that were part of positions you've had, part of leadership opportunities you've had, part of the work that you've done, so people understand the scope of what you've done and the breadth of what you've done. If I say, I was an assistant high school band director, that could mean I helped out with percussion sectionals twice a week and was part-time, or it could mean I conducted all the concert bands and all the marching bands and did jazz band and pit orchestra and madrigals. So those two things can entail very different experiences. You want to make sure that you're breaking down those experiences so people understand that, and you're presenting yourself again as positively as possible. So once you get an offer, you need to evaluate that offer and you need to make a decision. And oftentimes a big part of that decision are assistantships. So assistantships generally mean there's a tuition waiver and there's some kind of stipend. This varies per school, but you want to make sure you know going in what assistantships look like at the schools that you're looking at. Assistantships have enormous financial benefits, and being able to go to school and not have to pay tuition is huge, huge. But there's other benefits to assistantships. Assistantships also usually come with some kind of job or some kind of work experience, which is another experience that you can use to your benefit when you're applying for jobs. It's an opportunity for you to say, I have taught this class at this institution, and that's a great opportunity. So looking at those experiences, assistantships are not just financial benefits, but they're benefits in terms of work that you can say that you've done when you move on to the next step. So going on and looking a little bit at the next step, which is looking at resumes, looking at applications, and just in general, how you market yourself as successfully as you possibly can. One of the things that I get this question a lot, in education especially, you'll hear resume and you'll hear curriculum vitae, and sometimes they're used interchangeably. A curriculum vitae is usually more detailed than a resume and includes things like publications. So on my curriculum vitae, I include all the drill that I've written. I include guest speaking and guest conducting opportunities that I've had. So I'm including more things than I would normally just include on a resume. A resume is typically outlining work experience, leadership experience, and the things that directly apply to the job that you're interested in. So generally, you are looking at a resume until you have publications and things like that you need to include on a curriculum vitae. My best advice as you move forward in putting together resumes, how many of you already have a resume? Okay, that's great. So this might be somewhat review for you, but one of the things that I've learned is, as you are working on a resume, you want to make sure you keep it up to date. Because nothing's worse than having to sit down and think, oh man, what date did I do that 3 years ago? You want to make sure you have all that. So even if you just have a document and you just throw that stuff in there, without formatting, you just write it down and have a list, it will make your life so much easier when you go to actually include the things that you want to have in your resume. As you move forward, so as you have a resume, and as you start adding more things to the resume, you also want to look at what you remove from your resume. So you don't always keep everything there. As you get more experiences that are more applicable to what you want to do in the jobs that you're applying for, some of the things that are less applicable start to come off the resume because they're just not as important. And your resume may change based on the position you're applying for. If you're applying for grad school and you have to send in a resume, based on the program of study you're looking at, you're going to want to make sure that the experiences you have listed are experiences that highlight why you are going to be a successful student in that degree program. You want to list the most recent and applicable items first. So if I am, when I'm applying for jobs, when I applied for jobs here, even though one of my positions has been teaching swimming lessons and being a lifeguard, that was not first on my resume because that doesn't really apply to what I want to do as an athletic band director. So if you're applying to grad school and your 3 jobs that you've had are teaching swimming lessons, working at McDonald's, and mowing your neighbor's yard, those are not going to be top on your resume. They're going to be down at the bottom. And if you get through your resume and realize, wow, a couple things I have to move to another page, just get rid of those things at the bottom. Those things don't apply as much. You might think they do because it's work experience, but ultimately, responsibilities that you've held through leadership experiences are more meaningful than you mowed your neighbor's lawn. You want to make sure your resume is clear and simple. Assume people reading it don't understand the activities that you've done. So if I'm applying for a job in education, I want to assume that an administrator or a principal reading my resume isn't going to understand what it means when I say I directed the madrigal brass. They're not going to understand that. But if you break it down so they understand that this was an audition ensemble and it met X number of times a week, then that's information that they can understand. You want to break things down so that it's meaningful to everyone who's going to be looking at your resume and not just people within your career field. So on my curriculum vitae, when I talk about directing the symphonic band at Illinois State University, I don't just say directed symphonic band at Illinois State University. I say that group is mostly music majors. I say we rehearsed 4 hours a week, and I say it was a band of 60 students. So I want to give the information so they understand the breadth of what I'm talking about. I think 2 pages maximum is a good number for a resume. I don't think you want more. When you get more, it starts being information that's not as important, and you want to keep it very focused to what you want to do and what's most important. In terms of references, you want to compile a list and keep a list going of the people you want to use as references. Make sure you talk to each reference before you actually use them. Check in with them, make sure they're okay. The worst you don't want to get, even if they're okay with it, you never want to have somebody call your reference and have them be confused and seem like, wait, who? What job? Wait, who is this again? You don't want that. You want to make sure that they know because that's going to put you in the best light possible. You also want to put them in the order you want employers to call. So if you know that you've got these 4 great references, you don't want to put the one that you think is the best third on the list. Because if they only call the first 2, then they're not going to reach that third person. So you put in order that you want them to call on your list. Also, make sure you give schools exactly what they ask for. If you have one reference list, and that's what I have a reference list that has 8 people on it. And then depending on what schools ask for, I change it. If they ask for 5 references, I pick 5 out of those lists and put 5 on there. And again, I put the ones that I want them to call most. So if I was looking at a job in music education, I would put my music education professors first. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that so that you're getting the very best reference calls that you can get. You also want to put your most recent activities first. And you want to highlight what makes you different, interesting, and unique. So, for example, when I was at Virginia Tech, I was the chapter sponsor for Kappa Kappa Psi. So that's something that I want to make sure I include, because not only is it a great activity, and it got me more familiar with that organization and being involved with Kappa Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma, but it also shows that I've got experience with those kinds of activities. And if you're applying at a school, or somewhere that may not have included that as something that they would want you to do as part of the position you're applying for, it still may be a need that you can fill at that school, and that makes you a more desirable candidate. So you want to highlight those things because that shows and demonstrates your worth as a candidate. The other thing I think you want to do is you want to actively search for experiences that are going to set yourself up to be a valuable candidate, whether it's a job or whether it's a school. So if you're a music major, looking for opportunities where you can go run sectionals, where you can go observe, where you can go help out at local schools is a win, because it's something you can put on your resume, and it's something above and beyond the normal course of study. You want to put yourself above and beyond the other people who are applying for that job. So if I'm an administrator, I'm somebody looking at that, somebody who's done more than somebody else in the same place in their career just coming out of school is going to be more desirable to me because they have different experiences. They have more experience and more experiences in line with what they want to do. These are things that you have to seek out. Those opportunities don't just come to you. You have to actively go out and look for ways that you can better yourself. And it's not about necessarily a job and getting money for those things. It's about the worth that they bring to you and how you can serve that school. It goes both ways, but that's really, really valuable because it helps you out and it helps the school out. And anytime you start building those connections and building those relationships, it can lead to things later on down the line. So it's only a benefit for you to go out and actively look for those experiences. And if it's not music, if it's in accounting, or if it's in business, getting an opportunity to work part-time somewhere in the field, the career that you are interested in doing, or even going and asking to help out, asking if you can shadow them for a day to see what they do. You're building experiences and you're also building relationships and opportunities to work with other people. So the one thing that I want to leave you with as, we finish this presentation is there's really no substitute for experience. Through the experiences that I've had, I've learned far more than I learned just in classes. Even when I look at what I've done in school, I learned more through the experiences I had. So when I was at the University of Illinois as an undergrad, I loved my time there, and I loved the experiences I had, and they really set me up to want to do what I'm doing today. So those experiences were incredibly beneficial. When I was at Indiana, that was when they won the Sadler Trophy, which is a huge award that's awarded to college marching bands. And so I put together the Sadler Trophy, the display. There's a historical presentation that is part of the celebration. And that set me up when I went to Illinois. That's what I did my dissertation on. I did it on the history of IU bands and music in Bloomington, Indiana, which was really fun. It was great. And it's an experience, it's something that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have done that. And I get to come back and work on the display in the new 100 Hall with all of that stuff, which is really exciting. And so these are all experiences that I had that I looked for and went after separately from the things that were just provided to me. So I really did learn more in the positions that I had than I learned in the classes that I took. So how do you make that work for you? You have to look for opportunities to gain those experiences, and you have to really think about how you market yourself so those experiences define you, so that people understand the experiences you've had and how that makes you a great person, a desirable candidate, and somebody who's going to be really successful at what they do. Thank you so much for being a great audience. I hope you enjoy the rest of the convention, and I really appreciate your attention today.